very much for coming. We're doing this here at Gitana Cafe. Thank you to Fred for having us, and thank you all for coming to be part of it as well. I'm here with Scott and Shannon. Would you guys mind just introducing yourself quickly for everybody?
Hi, I am Shannon-Carr Davey, and I always say I was born in Manhattan but raised in Hermosa.
Scott Davey, and I was born back east but came out here when I was 12 or 13, and San Pedro and Palos Verdes, and lived here since 90. Probably been here since 90.
So, Shannon, you're from the area, so maybe Scott, what brought you to the area?
My wife.
Oh, there you have it. All right.
Yeah. I didn't let him have a choice. But yeah, my earliest memory of being in Hermosa was actually my brother and sister were on their bicycles. Well, my sister might have been on a tricycle, and my brother was on a bicycle with training wheels. And my dad had me with a towel under my seat on a bar on his bicycle on the 4th of July. I remember it was just a packed day in the early 60s, and going by the poop deck and the Mermaid, and just chaos reigned. And I remember a lot of firecrackers and a lot of people just wandering about. But that's my earliest memory of Hermosa until we moved here from Manhattan, and loved it ever since.
Very nice, thank you. And Scott, what were your first impressions?
So my first memory of Hermosa is when I tried out to be a LA County lifeguard in 1971. And at the time, the headquarters was not next to the pier. The headquarters was actually down where the chart house is now. And you showed up down there, and it was the tryouts for lifeguarding were always in March, and the water temperature 50, 51 degrees. That was just the way you did it. And walked down to the pier, and then they started 300 people, and they swam out and then down to the breakwater. That's about 1,500 meters total. And they took the first 30 people to finish. And that was my introduction. And we had 2 weekends of training. So, and in between the training, which was there, my first memory was having a sauce sandwich down at Mickey's Deli, which was, they just put rolls and red sauce on there, and I think they were 50 cents or something like that. And the starting pay, I had been worked at a gas station to try to put myself through school, and starting pay was, I think it was $1.50 an hour was the minimum wage, and I was making $1.65, so I was really up there. And the lifeguard job paid $3.89 an hour, and I didn't know what I was going to do with all that money.
We were chatting a little bit earlier about the professionalization of lifeguarding at that time. Can you talk to me about what that process was like, maybe what some of the differences are between then and now, or how that change came about?
So I think I was really fortunate to work with some of the guys from World War II that came out of World War II and were kind of our first lifeguards to kind of professionalize things. They brought in resuscitators, and at the time, the fire department did not do EMS. It was all lifeguards. And so when there was a call in any of the beach cities, Redondo, Hermosa, Manhattan, the lifeguards got called out at night, and they responded for EMS calls, which changed probably in the late 60s, early 70s. And so I was really fortunate to work with many of the legends that, if you look at the Surfer Walk of Fame, you know, at least half of those people were lifeguards and big wave surfers, the Greg Knowles and the Sonny Vardamans. And I was really fortunate to have those type of people as mentors, and how much they didn't talk beach culture. They talked ocean culture for lifeguards. And kind of the difference would be, you know, people who come down to the beach and play volleyball and, you know, sit on the beach and, you know, jump in the water a little bit. Where lifeguards, the water culture was, they were sailors and scuba divers and skin divers, and they'd go out and get abalone, and they'd big wave surfers. You know, that was what they kind of focused on. And I was really fortunate to learn from them. And so, Shannon?
Well, Shannon, I wanted to ask, what was your first, how'd you get involved in lifeguarding? What year might that have been, and what did lifeguarding look like at that time for you?
I have to say, I'll wait for the siren.
So are people in the back okay without the microphones, or should we use microphones? Okay. Thank you.
You know, I grew up here and went to Maricosta. At the time, my swim coach was a man named Joe Bird, and he'd been there for a while. He was also a lifeguard, and he worked mostly San Pedro and Torrance Beach, kind of that end of town. But he came and worked, you know, his teaching job at Maricosta, and he talked me into taking the test, because when I met him, it was my junior year. I was on the swim team. They just blended the seasons because of Title IX and all that. So they just finally got the men and the women's season together. And he got me doing ocean swims. So I love doing the peer-to-peer swim and the Naples swim and the Santa Monica swim. And he actually was really willing, and with his kids, he drove us all over Southern California, down to San Diego and whatnot for these races. And he was the one that said on my senior year, he goes, you know, this lifeguard test is very similar to the Santa Monica 1 mile ocean swim. So why don't you go do this lifeguard test and get a preliminary time on it? And I'm, okay, coach, yeah, let's go do it. So that was how he got me to try out, and I ended up making it. And, you know, I'm so grateful that I did, you know, but when I started, I was just going, who wants to be a lifeguard? But yeah, so it was a wonderful experience to meet all these great people on the beach.
And at the time you started, do you mind if I ask, about how many women would you say were in lifeguarding? What was that experience or that like for you?
Yeah, there were only 4 or 5 women before me. The year I came in, there was a few of us. There were a total of 8. And the year I came on, when he came on, they took only 39 people. When I came on, they had skipped a year. And so all of a sudden they needed lifeguards. And so they took over 120 people.
Oh, wow.
And not all of those people made it, but they had 4 training academy classes. And I ended up having to be in the 4th one. And the reason was because I wasn't 18 yet. And I hadn't graduated from high school yet. So they let me go, and then I couldn't work until after that high school graduation date. So my first day on the beach was actually July 4th at Manhattan Beach Pier.
So one of the interesting things Shannon said, how they took 120 people because they'd skipped a year versus 30 when I was there. And one of the reasons was when I started, Los Angeles County had its own lifeguard service, Santa Monica City had its own service, and LA City had its own service. So each one of those took 20 or 30 people, which is where you're going to get that larger number. And in 1975, I think one of the best things that the county ever did, and Santa Monica and LA City, is they merged those lifeguard services together so that you didn't have a duplication of 3 administrations and 3 different types of rescue boats and 3 different types of training academies. And since 1975, the county is lifeguarded from Catalina and San Pedro all the way up to Zuma Beach. And this year is the 50th anniversary of that kind of merger, which to me speaks to good government, right? Kind of eliminating that duplication of service.
On the topic of the roles that lifeguards perform, you were talking earlier in professionalization about doing all the EMT style roles. In the museum, you were involved, thank you very much for being involved, in the youth lifeguard program where kids could come, learn to draw a lifeguard tower to scale, learn about lifeguarding and some beach culture in general. How have you seen that develop over time? The sort of educational role of lifeguards, or some of the other things that the public might not necessarily think of first when it comes to lifeguarding. Have you seen more of that sort of role develop, or slowly?
Yeah, I think that the junior lifeguard program has always been hugely successful, and it actually, the first junior lifeguard started in Santa Monica in 1928, and there was I think 8 of them, and they were all boys because women couldn't do that sort of thing. And finally, with the merger and the realization of how important that was and how supported junior lifeguards have been, when I was the director in 1999, we reached 2,500 kids, which was like, how can we do that? And today they have over 4,000 kids from, like I said, from Catalina all the way up to Zuma. And Hermosa has 2 programs, one at TK or 2nd Street and one at the pier. And Hermosa's program is the largest of all of those in LA County.
You mentioned the merger as a factor in getting more women into lifeguarding. So do you see that as coming more out of necessity from the top, more out of grassroots, folks like Shannon sort of paving the way and getting more directly involved? Where do you see that change coming from, or how did that move forward? What were the drivers of that expansion in your eyes?
Title IX?
Yeah, probably Title IX. It was just, they finally opened the door, and people in the upper echelon were finally realizing that, yeah, women are more than capable of doing this. And as I always said, the ocean is a great equalizer. I can go through the surf just as fast as a lot of the guys, and
Probably a lot faster, but
well, we won't go into that.
So let's go into that. So every year, to stay lifeguarding, you have to do a recertification swim. You've got to be able to swim. And so it's a 500-meter ocean swim, and everybody lines up, and you have to do it within a certain time. And if you don't, sorry, you're out. And kind of needs to be that way. And Shannon and I had an ongoing yearly bet. The loser did dishes for a year. So, we trained pool swimming, and I trained, and the only time I think I beat her was she was 6 months pregnant, but I kicked her ass. She was a great ocean swimmer.
Thank you, honey.
High stakes on that bet. That's
Boy, my hands still have not recovered.
On the topic of being out in the ocean, any I hesitate to say favorite, but most interesting rescue stories or things along those lines that you'd like to share, either or both of you?
You know, we've had some crazy rescues at the time, you know, and you don't think about it that when you're doing it until afterwards, and you're just going, did I just do that? But to tell you the truth, the one that stands out in my mind was just after we bought our house on 25th Street, and we were painting the rooms, you know, painting the interior, and I just finally said, I need to go take a nap. I need, you know, let me just get out of these fumes. So I came down here to the beach, and it was spring, and I just found a spot in the warm sand back of the beach, and I just laid down. And I couldn't tell you how long I took my nap for, but all of a sudden I caught myself up, and I'm running towards 22nd Street. And I'm not sure why, but I'm running, and I look up and I see the lifeguard finally grabbing the rescue can, and he's running down the ramp heading towards 22nd Street or 19th Street, and he's making a rescue. And it I guess I'd been doing lifeguarding so long, it just became instinctual that I felt the anxiety or something. But I woke up and I raced down to 22nd Street, and I was looking for another rescue can, and luckily the truck came and was able to back them up at 19th Street. But that was just one moment in time that it was crazy. And I remember walking home, wiping the sand from the drool off my my chin. But you know, it's just the rescues just kind of occur, and you it becomes almost instinctual at times. We see it, and we just respond and go. And so that was just one experience.
For me, you know, each of us over our careers, and Shannon worked for 33 years?
33. Yep.
And I had 39 years in. And over that time, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of rescues. And sometimes you'd do 20 rescues in a day, and, you know, out and back in, and not have time to dry off on really, really busy days. And as Shannon said, some of it just kind of becomes instinctual. And I probably remember just so few of those, because the one that sticks out for me was, and I still get like shaky about it, is I was a captain up at Venice. And Venice is one of my favorite places to work because the craziest things happen there. And as a captain, the beach is about twice as big as Hermosa. And it's kind of divided up. You have the Venice Pier kind of on the south end, and then the peninsula, and then kind of that central area. And you have the breakwater there, and then it goes all the way down and meets Santa Monica. And so there's places where you can't really see around the corner. It's not like Hermosa, a long beach. And this is probably one of the busiest days I've ever been involved with. And every tower was manned. There was a big south swell running, and it's like 2:30 in the afternoon. Every lifeguard in the water, including the Santa Monica captain, who had to come up because there was a full CPR from a rescue. So the captain was on a CPR with 2 other lifeguards, and every one of those 23 towers, every lifeguard was in the water. I was the last person in my vehicle, and I was driving toward helping out that CPR at the Venice Pier. And I just happened to be by the Venice Pier, and these people were shouting on the pier, pointing down. And I looked out, and I saw, it turned out to be an 8-year-old girl, and all I could see was her hair floating on the surface. And I managed to get out and dive down and grab her hair and pull her up, and gave her 2 quick breaths out in the water, and brought her up and onto the beach, and I was the only one there, gave her some oxygen, and I had to leave the oxygen with her, and had just a patron come up and just, can you watch her? Because we all had to go into the water again. And normally you don't leave a victim like that, right? But she was talking, she was breathing, she was getting oxygen. But that rescue kind of stands out in my mind. That and you talk to many of the lifeguards who worked as long as we did, and every one of them will have a story like that. Mm-hmm. Mine is not necessarily unique. And the lifeguards that we worked with, the professional lifeguards, and all of them have a story about coming that close to losing somebody, and just serendipity, that I happened to be there and see that while that was happening. So,
thank you.
And the girl did great. I was able to get back and make sure she was okay with her family, and I do have one fun story, because I hate to end on that, and it's a Venice story, and it deals with EMS call. And when I worked in Venice, the people I worked for, who had been there forever, and I was coming from the South Bay and from Zuma to Venice, and they said, whatever you hear over the radio, we're not bullshitting you. When you hear this call, it's for real, no matter how weird it sounds. Because, lifeguards, like anybody else, they'll play some jokes on people sometimes. And sure enough, over the radio, I hear, respond back to the boardwalk. We have an elephant that's been injured. And, you kind of, all right. And you go back there, and sure enough, one of the Hare Krishna, they were having a parade like they do there, and a pit bull had taken a chunk out of this elephant's leg. And it wasn't that big, but it was. And so, we got to put saline on it and wrap it up, and off the elephant went. But you just never know.
Never know what you'll encounter.
You never know
what you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
Explains your love of working in Venice too.
It does.
Seldom see an elephant here in Hermosa, right?
Yep.
I haven't seen one yet. Well, I should say, maybe at night after being down at one of the bars, I've seen a few.
And it was pink.
Right.
Pink elephant, yeah.
So you were talking earlier about the perceived difference, at least, between ocean culture and beach culture. Have you seen, what similarities or changes have you seen over time? Any continuities or changes over time, and how those have been perceived, or how people have interacted with each, just from the time you started lifeguarding to today, let's say? Anything come to mind?
I don't think it has changed that much. I think, well, I'd say that the beach culture, in Hermosa, the people who've grown up here, I think they've seen a huge difference in just the people who on our street, who'd grown up here, were assistant postmasters and teachers and firefighters, and pretty much Hermosa was kind of all blue collar, right? And the little homes that were little beach cottages, and you could still afford rent, and I think that eclectic part of Hermosa that Shannon was part of and grew up with, and we became part of. I think I've seen that, unfortunately, go away from that perspective. Now, whether that's good or bad, it's changed. But for me, the days of people. I was walking down my street, and I walk down when I'm an old guy, and I'm barefoot, walk down to the beach to jump in the water, and a police car pulled up one day, And he goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I go, "I'm walking down to the beach, from my house." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, we just got a call that the homeless guy was was wandering around. So we might not have gotten that call, 50 years ago. But and the cop was great. But it was just kind of, maybe that's what."
And I keep getting him new pairs of trunks to wear.
Well, that's part of the problem.
Pulling out the old one.
So I do have that look.
Well, now they're just vintage trunks. The old
That's
ones
right.
are vintage,
That's
right?
right. You're going to ask for them in the museum.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things I can say I have seen from growing up here. When I was a kid, we did not see pelicans. We might see a sea lion now and then. We would see a whale occasionally, but the sea life we did not see. I remember, never saw a dolphin, and it wasn't until the late 70s and the 80s, after people started realizing what's coming out of the storm drains, and Heal the Bay started really looking at what we're swimming in. And that was a huge change, and it's, I would tell people, we didn't see pelicans, and now we're seeing them again. And that is huge, to see the wildlife coming back to the bay. That was doing peer-to-peer, and being able to swim along in that, being underwater or swimming on top of the water and it being so crystal clear. And I remember that one time swimming over in the middle of the peer-to-peer race, and I'm looking down and I'm almost to the pier, and I see a shark just cruising on the bottom. And I'm going, God, that's a good sized shark. I should dive down and see actually how big it is, because they always look bigger up. And I just went, hold it. There's 1,000 people around me right now. They probably wouldn't appreciate me going and hassling a shark. So I just said, just get around the pier, Shannon. I'm almost done. But that's the change I have seen. I've seen our beach grow. We have so much sand that we have here, and I'm happy to see that, but I'm also a bit nervous on how it's changed. And, our climate change, we used to have a small, tiny beach when there was no King Harbor and no Marina del Rey. The water and the sand would move, and we'd have surf breaks and all that. And things like that have changed. So.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. The tangible things like that you can see and feel being out on the water every day like that, definitely.
Yep.
If you have a chance, and everybody probably here knows Barbara Guild, but from the Guild family, and Barbara is a phenomenal. How old is she? Is she 95? 93. And Kevin and I met with her. My educational background was in geography, and I was actually a beach planner as part of my career, and studying erosion of the beach and facility development was all one of my things. So Barbara and I got to talk, and we talked about the growth of the beach. And she talked when she moved in the house she's on in 19th Street. In 1953, the high tide line was 30 yards from the Strand.
Oh.
And now, I walked it off, it's 150 yards further than it was in that time. And so, as Shannon mentioned, that the improvement on the sea life. We used to have to, when I started, if you saw a pelican, you had to record it in the log. It was that unusual. And in the summer, you might have seen one or two for a whole summer. And then as time went by, all of a sudden you'd see more. But to have to log seeing a pelican, can you imagine that? Somebody went, "Hey, we just saw a pelican," like a unicorn.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's nice to hear something positive on that front.
Yeah.
It's
A lot of positive things
Yeah.
have changed. Yep.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Along the lines of positive things, maybe what's your fondest memory in Hermosa? Anything stand out?
You know, because this is home, I have so many. I, of my mom and my dad, and whole family being at the beach, coming down together as a family. I mean, I have my husband and I got married in our backyard up on, Silver Street in Hermosa. Um, my son being born, in the house we live in now. Um, so I have all those wonderful, wonderful memories. So I'm just so happy that this guy was willing to move to Hermosa and be here because, my family has all moved away, but they're all more than happy to come and stay with us and visit with us here in Hermosa. So,
Scott, anything come to mind?
Well, besides my wife, that's my fondest memory of Hermosa, right? I just think what a unique place Hermosa is, and it's not Newport Beach, and it's not even Manhattan Beach these days. It is so unique and so eclectic, and in the history museum that everybody's so involved with, and whether it's Ricardo or what they've done with the history museum, encapsulate kind of the lifeblood and the feeling of the Hermosa residents, which is so wonderful. You have the jazz from the lighthouse, and you have the punk era, and you have the volleyball beach culture, and the Surfers Walk of Fame, and the original Surf City, all the lifeguard manufacturers, the Greg Knowles and the Vardamans and the Rick Stoners and all of those people, and I've seen the hats that say "Keep Hermosa, Hermosa," and like, okay, what time period are they talking about, and I think that's what I love about Hermosa, and change is coming, and all the little places are being replaced by big mansions, and people are second homes, and the post office and the firefighters and the teachers, maybe aren't able to live here as much, and but hopefully Hermosa retains its unique character.
On the topic of that character, before I let you guys go, one thing, you were mentioning all the things in the museum. It came to mind the 16th Street Lifeguard Towers in there, which I understand you had something to do with.
Yeah.
Any fun stories about that process, how that tower got there?
I remember I was pregnant with my son at the time, so they put me into one of the head administration parts of the lifeguard service, and they were talking about what are they going to do with all these old lifeguard towers? Let's see if some other agency wants to buy them. But we're talking some pretty old structures. And I remember my mom was president at the time, and Rick was part of this too, where
President
of the Historical Society,
right.
And she goes, how could I go about getting one of these towers? And we talked to Don Kanabe, who was supervisor at the time, and he says, we'll sell it to you for $1. And made it work. And I remember coming down that day, and I said, which tower do you want, Mom? And everybody wanted 16th Street Tower. And it was one of the older towers. And I think it was just because it wasn't right next to the pier, and more locals went to it because it was more secluded, a little darker, a little more personal. And I remember how they came down and Rick was there and how they kind of towed it back and then they started taking it apart and numbering it piece by piece. And then they had to store it for a while before they could get it into the museum when it was under renovation. But that was a real treat to get that in there so people could kind of experience what it was like to sit in a box.
It's definitely one of the cooler centerpieces and more locally touchstone of a centerpiece for the museum. So thank you for your help there and involvement with that. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to add or conclude with?
Oh gosh. I'm so happy to be a part of this community, and I am so thrilled that we have this resource, this museum, this history. And as Scott was saying, it touches on so much of what everybody brings to this community. We think about the volleyball and all the athletes and the sports, the architecture, the buildings, the cottages that we used to have. Just we were, we're such a small town, but we were kind of cutting edge, which is really thrilling, not only for music and contemporary type art and things and surfing and all that, but first aid, EMS, I just am blown away with what we have brought not only to our community, but to the area in general,
And I guess I would leave it with the stories that Shannon and I have. The lifeguard mentors that I've had, and the younger lifeguards that hopefully we have mentored, are all just such quality people, and we are not unique necessarily. And we thank you for listening to some of our stories, but there's thousands of stories out there of lifeguards who did the job just like us and grew up in this kind of area, and those are the people that kind of have made things over the years. So
thank you very much for being here and talking. It's been a pleasure. I think are you open to answering some questions from folks?
As long as it's not Ricardo.
All right.
I know for years, the LA County Lifeguard Association and the trust fund, there's actually a trust fund, would love to have a museum in a space and to be able to show off, many of the things that we have. Unfortunately, we don't have the room, and I don't know how we can merge those things together. But let's keep talking about it, and they're having a lifeguard museum to me would be just fabulous. And we do have many things, lifeguard paddle boards and surfboards and original metal cans, the tower. I think Shannon has when you retire as a lifeguard now, instead of a watch or whatever, one of our lifeguards, who was a famous sculptor, did a bronze of a lifeguard standing. And when you retire, you get this bronze. And Shannon donated hers to the museum, and there's things like that we can keep providing for the museum. But again, lifeguards, as much as we feel we're integral in this community and have been that way since the 30s, we're just a small part of, whether it's like I said, the jazz or the punk era, or the art, or our Easy Reader newspaper, which is integral to our community, especially Hermosa.
Other questions? Anybody?
Is there, explain a little bit about, are there still recurrent lifeguards, seasonal lifeguards, and how do they sort of fit in with the bigger picture?
So let me take that one if I can.
Yeah.
So in LA County, there's about 800 lifeguards. Of those, 160 are year-round permanent. So the rest are seasonal or recurrent lifeguards. And they're hired based on seniority. And to me, it's one of the most efficient government services that we have, because there's a list on a daily basis. And if all of a sudden we get a huge school group come down and show up at 22nd Street, the captain at headquarters will call up first guy on the list and go, can you come in for 4 hours? I think that's the minimum, because they didn't want somebody coming in for an hour, right? So a 4 hour minute. Can you come in for 4 hours and get down there in 20 minutes? I'll be there. And they'll show up for 4 hours, watch those people, and then go away. And to me, it's extremely efficient. And in the summertime, when there's, then they staff almost all the towers. But in the other 8 months a year, they're seasonal hires. And it depends on the surf, the conditions, and the crowds. Those three things dictate if they're going to hire somebody for 4 hours or 8 hours. Or
So these people probably have other day jobs, and do they have to meet the same standards that the professional?
Same standards. So you have to be able to swim every year and recertify, and recertify with your CPR and your first aid and your swim. And we have lifeguards who have been judges, airline pilots, lots of educators.
My orthopedic surgeon is one.
Mhm.
Is that Dan?
Stevenson,
Dr.
yeah.
Dr. Dan. Dan Stevenson. So we have multitude of attorneys and doctors and students. Obviously a lot of students.
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty eclectic group.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they all seem to have is wanting to give back to their community.
And their love of the ocean.
And their love of the ocean.
Yeah.
And so it's huge.
That's great.
So next time you get help with the first aid or rescued, right? It could be an orthopedic surgeon who's and you might ask him about how's that knee or
For a while there, what was it? One of our guys was the communications officer for the space shuttle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yep. Navy SEALs.
Navy SEALs, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. It's always nice to see all of our friends here too,
Yeah.
and our new friends.
Thank you all for coming out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you again.
you.
It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.